You are listening to Brand Me, Alex Merced, with me, Alex Merced. On this show, we'll be talking about the ins and outs of branding and how to empower yourself by defining yourself. We'll talk about the tools, the methods, the strategies, so that way you can take a brand to achieve your goals in your personal life, your professional life, in all of your life. If you need help implementing these ideas and using these tools to achieve your goals, contact Alex Merced to be your branding coach by heading over to mercedbranding.com. If you've been enjoying this content by Merced Branding, head over to mercedbranding.com and check out the offers page, where you'll just find great offers from some of our sponsors, such as Amazon's Audible, Bluehost, and NordVPN. Check out mercedbranding.com. Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and you're listening to Brand Me, Alex Merced, where I talk about branding. I mean, basically the goal of this podcast is to teach you how to empower yourself by defining yourself, how to develop your brand either as an individual or for your project, so that way you can feel more confident about what you're doing. That way you can be more successful in what you're doing. So if you feel like you've been really getting that value out of the show, please do share it with your friends. Please do leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. It is very appreciated. It helps us get that word out there so that way more people can empower themselves. Now, the last several episodes, what we've been doing is kind of crafting this the story of me, and how I've learned and how the experiences that kind of informed me about a lot of the lessons learned in marketing and branding that I've had over the years. And we're kind of getting up to modern day and where I'm at now in life. So last time we talked about my 11 years at Greco Financial Training, a company that I'm still very much involved with. And now we're going to talk about the Libertarian Party. Now, this podcast is not a place where I plan on talking about politics. It's not about everybody with every point of view has a need to empower themselves, has a need to define themselves. But I am someone who is involved with the Libertarian Party, and through the Libertarian Party, I have tried and tested out a lot of marketing techniques over the years. So I'm going to tell you my story about my involvement with the party. So if you're not a Libertarian, don't worry about it. This is not going to be about discussing what the issues are or whatnot. If you are a Libertarian, I'm not going to discuss it. I do have other podcasts where I do talk about politics. You guys can go look those up and check that out. But what I want to talk about is what I've learned from a marketing, and because when you're campaigning, when you're involved in politics, a lot of it, almost all of it, is branding and marketing. Because there's what's called there's an academic by the name of Brian Kaplan who wrote a book, The Myth of the Rational Voter. And it's just kind of talking about how like most people are what's called rationally ignorant, in the sense that they are so busy with life, paying their bills, make sure the kids go to school, just living their day-to-day lives, that they don't have time to be keeping up with every bit of things that are going on. So a lot of times we may feel that what's going on in politics is so important. Why don't people spend more time following on what's in politics? But at the end of the day, what's going to put food in their kids' mouths is those hours at work, more so in the short run than the hours they may have to spend researching the issues to really feel like they can make an informed vote. So in that case, it often is the sound bites, the image that people have of you that'll determine sort of your political success. And so that's sort of where we're going to be getting at in today's episode. So first, let's just kind of go into the story of kind of how I got involved and whatnot. So I got into sort of libertarian ideas around 2000, 2008, part of that election. I mean, as the economy is collapsing and all this stuff, I started kind of really questioning a lot of my foundational political ideas and exploring all the different ideas out there, and found myself kind of landing on libertarianism. It's sort of very much a ideology that kind of speaks to sort of individual taking over your life, empowering yourself kind of thing. So it kind of spoke to me. So then what happens is that I started kind of going deeper and going into sort of all the academic writings, all the philosophical writings, all the economic writings, reading and immersing myself in the knowledge. Because if you're going to promote something, so whether I'm talking about promoting a game store or promoting a financial training company, a music promotions, all these different things that you've heard me talk about or do,
you got to know what you're talking about, okay? You got to be able to demonstrate your authenticity and your expertise by actually being authentic and an expert, okay? Some things you just can't fake, but you can become it, okay, by immersing yourself in the information. And a good way to practice, and this is something you can use for whatever you're learning to do, is to document your learning. So what I did is, as I was learning about libertarianism, I actually started a YouTube channel. This was actually my first sort of kind of how I got into YouTube. There was a few videos I uploaded before from my concert promoting days, but my YouTube channel really kind of came into full swing. And I have multiple YouTube channels now, so this would be sort of my political one if you've seen it. Got into full swing when I started learning about a lot of this stuff. And what I would do is I would learn something, and I would put it on YouTube. I would just record myself explaining what I've learned, which helped me kind of think through what I learned, so that way I know sort of what are the holes in what I've learned and whatnot. And also made me better at speaking on these issues, which allowed me to speak with more authority, with more expertise, etc., more eloquently, and just made me a better speaker in general. And kind of being able to see the criticism of people who left comments also was helpful. Sometimes the haters can be annoying, but the haters can be your friends when they give you constructive advice. Those who just say mean things, you can ignore them. But there will be those who point out, hey, you said something wrong here, or you weren't very clear here, and they are gold, they are helpful. Listen to that advice, take it to heart. So that's what I did. And then this brand started getting created. I mean, I was just immersing myself at the time. I was beginning my career over there at Greco Financial Training, and this was just more of a labor of love. Just was really interested in the topic. But over time, I started noticing I had more and more listeners, and people started really enjoying the videos and learning from the videos, because I was kind of shortcutting the process for them, because instead of them having to go through all this reading and all the stuff that I was doing, they could just hear my videos where I synthesized a lot of this stuff, and I became a better at talking about it. So then in 2013, there was a hole in the New York City slate for libertarian candidates for the public advocate office, which is sort of like the vice mayor of New York City. So the mayoral candidate was actually familiar with my YouTube channel, and was a fan, and reached out to me and said, hey, Alex, we know you're in New York City. Would you like to become our public advocate candidate? And this is in 2013. So basically, I said, yeah, why not? So this was my first campaign, and I didn't know anything about campaigning. I mean, I followed politics because I found it interesting in the same way many people would follow sports, So I didn't know what the traditional politicking was and whatnot, and the internet's still kind of being figured out in politics at this time. So what I do for the most part is, again, product, place, all those P's. So I'm focusing on place again. Well, you know what? New York City is difficult because in New York City, you're filled with people who are from out of town, whether they're tourists, whether they're people who are commuting into town. You're also dealing with a lot of people who can't legally vote for one reason or another. And so basically finding an actual registered voter in New York City is like finding a needle in a haystack oftentimes. There's thousands of people everywhere, but let's say you go to Union Square, it's almost all tourists and college kids. So in that case, it becomes how do you reach out to people who actually sort of truly live and vote in New York City, who oftentimes live in the outer boroughs. Oftentimes they're in the city they're in Manhattan during the day for work, but when they go back home, they go home and they're not accessible because you can't just get into apartment buildings. It's not like a normal sort of suburban neighborhood where you can knock on doors and people answer their door. So it presents sort of a political logistical challenge, which is why cities are kind of hard to campaign in. And extra hard if you're a third party where you're basically dealing with no resources and no support. So my thought process was to join every Facebook group for New York City. So I would join the New York City Swing Dancers group. I would join the New York City, single mothers group and whatnot. And I didn't sit there and just bombard them with spam. I mean, no, I tried to be good about it. I tried to participate in the conversation that was going on, so that way people would know who I am, and also get a feel sort of for the feel of the group. But that's why important is doing that market research, that listening aspect. Because if you don't know who your audience is and you don't get kind of understand what kind of messages they're receptive to, you're going to land bad messages. So I would do this, and I would basically craft messages that were in line with sort of my platform, my beliefs, but appeal to the issues that they cared about. So like the Swing Dancers group, I would talk about what New York City used to have these cabaret laws, which they since got rid of, which basically meant you had to get like a license to allow dancing in your bar. It was sort of an old Prohibition era, a vestige of Prohibition. So they were in tune with that message. And I would do this for every kind of New York City level group I can find, because I could find actual New York City voters that way. And the end result came November. While I didn't get a huge vote total in the grand scheme of the election, for libertarian candidates that year in New York City, I got the highest vote total with over 10,000 votes, which was about double the next highest total. And that was with sort of a very non-traditional campaign strategy. That was with like no resources, didn't take any donations. That was just purely just me building relationships primarily through social media and appearing at a couple different street fairs. Because again, I had other things going on in life. But this got me really involved with the party. And I ended up running for office again in 2016 for U.S. Senate in New York against Chuck Schumer, which you might have heard of. And that was also very interesting because here's one thing I've learned. In politics, most people vote for, they're either going to vote for inertia, so they're going to just kind of vote the way they always vote for because people are busy, so they don't have time to assess every candidate for every office. So oftentimes and this is where sort of party identity matters, and party branding is really important because they're going to end up just voting for the people who sort of are part of the team that they kind of identify with most. So a lot of times people don't know who that U.S. Senate candidate is. They don't even know necessarily who the presidential candidate are. They just have a association with Democrat, Republican, and they're probably not really aware of much of the third parties, which, that makes sort of the third party challenges going to how do you create that brand identity, which is a project that I've been taking on for a long time with the Libertarian Party. So it's about building those relationships. So I took a lot of approach different than a lot of candidates. When you're a small sort of party, the people who are your candidates are oftentimes your activists because you don't have as large a network to get, your nice polished candidates that you would traditionally see in, let's say, Republican Democratic parties, because you don't have those sort of long timers, those sort of, you don't have those professional third partiers. You're involved in the third parties because you generally kind of care a little bit more. And you have the time to care a little bit more, whether it's because you just either have the financial flexibility to do so, or this is what you do. So, I try to incorporate a lot more of that personal touch. So I traveled New York State, and I tried to use social media to the best that I can, and still showing positive results. Because bottom line is that when you're the great thing about being a third-party candidate is that I didn't need to hire people to run my social media. I did it myself. And being younger and being someone who's used social media for different things, whether it's for the Gamers Lounge and all those marketing techniques I've learned in the past, I was able to use it for this. Okay, to take photos. So basically, if I went to Buffalo, I would make sure I head over to Anchor Bar, where buffalo wings were sort of first created, and take a picture of me eating buffalo wings. It's not something that speaks to any particular issue, but a lot of times people want to know that you care about where they are at, especially in New York, where oftentimes upstate New York feels very ignored because the majority of the population is in New York City. So being aware of sort of the landscape and how people feel. And that's where me being involved in Facebook groups really helped, because I get a vibe for how different people felt in different areas and what issues they cared about. Because I did the same thing where I basically joined every New York group that I could think of or that I could find, whether it was in Syracuse or Buffalo or whatnot, and allowed me to kind of build relationships with my voter base. Allowing me at the end of the day still getting a paltry vote total in the large scheme of things, but a much larger vote total than a libertarian has traditionally gotten in New York, with about just shy of 50,000 votes. Typically, you'd see previous libertarian candidates get about 27,000 votes, just to put it into perspective. And then there was someone who took that much, much further than I ever could, and that was Larry Sharp, who ran for governor, another person who you can learn a lot of great marketing ideas from, who also kind of works in that space. So the takeaway so far is still understanding, one, how your target, so my target market was New York voters. So since I didn't have the resources to be doing the traditional sort of blanketing TV ads, I wasn't going to be able to get into the debates. I took the approach of saying, okay, where else can I find them? And Facebook groups was sort of one way that I did that. So being able to reach people by finding out where do they congregate that I do have access to. So in that case, if you don't have the money for TV ads and whatnot, where does your target market hang out that you can afford to be at? Okay, and then over time, also the importance of brand identity, because at the end of the day, people very much will care about how they identify as a brand. So a lot of people, whether they vote Libertarian, Democrat, Republican, it's going to be basically how they feel about that word. Because when they vote, oftentimes when you take the action of voting for Libertarian, Democrat, Republican, you're basically saying, I am this, or at least that's how people feel about it. So knowing that, you have to kind of construct your message to make people comfortable with the idea of saying, I am this, I am that. So in essence, you need to think about what does your product, or what does the action you're looking for your target market to do say about themselves? Because people oftentimes do make a lot of choices based on what they do communicate to the people around them. So if people have negative views of what a libertarian is, they're going to be much more hesitant to vote libertarian, even if they agree on the issues, because they don't want to, because they're feeling they're communicating this negative message to other people about themselves. So you have to, and this is where a lot of politics ends up going, trying to define sort of the opposing teams as sort of very negative and very bad. Whether it's Republicans defining Democrats and Democrats defining Republicans, they very often are playing to this sort of identity level of voting. And that's a very big aspect for a lot of products. What people wear, if you're clothing, a lot of times people care about what does their clothing say about them? What does the brand say about who they are? And if they're same thing with food, when I eat at this restaurant, what does it say about them? So knowing sort of what your brand, not only what does your brand say about itself, but what does it say about your customers when they consume your brand? That is something to take very much into consideration when trying to construct your marketing messages. And when there's deep competition, like in politics, where it's very stiff competition in that regard, it's not like most businesses. Most businesses, I can define a positive message for my restaurant without having to define a negative message for your restaurant, because you can eat at both restaurants. But in politics, you can only vote for one political party. So it becomes sort of this dual end where you're not only defining yourself positively, but you're trying to define your opponents negatively. So in that regard, I don't encourage people to define others negatively. It's not a very nice thing to do. But the point is, define yourself. You want to define yourself before somebody else does, because that's going to end up playing a huge role in what happens and what your results are at the end of the day. So if you know you're going to be in a competitive space where you may have people who will not take kindly to you taking market share, because it isn't something where, like, let's see, for example, a cable. Okay, if you get a cable package from my company, you're not getting a cable package from the other company. So there's going to be a little bit more fierce competition. Then you got to be more aggressive about defining yourself. So hopefully you guys found this a useful story. If you do want to hear more of the little political stuff, you can head on over to my other podcast. Just search Alex Merced on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. You'll find all my other podcasts where I rant about all that other stuff. But hopefully you found some information that was important regarding the marketing end of things, the branding end of things, that'll help you think through your marketing messages, your marketing strategies, and also timing. Because again, timing, when I talk about having to define yourself before somebody else timing is very particular. So my name is Alex Merced. You're listening to Brand Me Merced. Have a great day and enjoy.
Thank you for listening to Brand Me Alex Merced on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to like Alex Merced on Facebook, on Twitter, and head over to mercedbranding.com to find us on social media and find other useful advice and resources in marketing and achieving your goals.